Natalie Vance stared at the contract on her father's mahogany desk, the weight of her family's financial ruin pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden she could not escape. The numbers blurred together as tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back with the same stubborn determination that had gotten her through the past 6 months of watching her father's commercial real estate empire crumble. The medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment had drained their savings first, then the market crash had taken everything else. Now, at 25, she was sitting across from her father, listening to him explain why an arranged marriage to a billionaire she had never met was their only way out. "Preston Blackwell is a reasonable man," her father said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and shame. "His family has been in shipping and logistics for 3 generations. He needs a wife to secure a merger with the Chen family in Hong Kong. They are very traditional and want to see him settled before finalizing the deal. You need financial security. It is a business arrangement, nothing more." "Does he know I have no choice?" Natalie asked quietly, her fingers trembling as she picked up the pen. Her father looked away. "He knows the situation is mutually beneficial." She signed her name with steady strokes despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. The ink seemed to seal her fate in more ways than one. A future written in contracts and obligations, rather than love and choice. 3 days later, she found herself on a plane to Seattle, where Preston's company headquarters towered over the waterfront like a steel and glass monument to everything she was about to become part of. The wedding was scheduled for 2 months away, giving them time to get acquainted and satisfy the appearance of a genuine relationship. Preston had arranged for her to stay in a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle, all expenses paid, with a generous monthly allowance that made her stomach turn with the reality of what she had agreed to. She was being bought, essentially, even if everyone involved dressed it up in prettier language. On her 3rd day in the city, Natalie decided she needed to escape the gilded cage of her apartment. The rain had finally stopped after 2 days of relentless downpour, and she found herself wandering through Pike Place Market with no destination in mind. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with the salt of the ocean, and for the first time since signing that contract, she felt like she could breathe. "Watch out!" A deep voice called out, but the warning came too late. Natalie collided with someone carrying an armful of paint supplies, sending tubes of acrylic and brushes scattering across the wet cobblestones. She stumbled backward, and strong hands caught her elbows, steadying her before she could fall. "I am so sorry," she gasped, looking up into the most striking hazel eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and a jawline that belonged in a cologne advertisement. He wore paint-splattered jeans and a faded gray Henley that stretched across broad shoulders, and when he smiled at her, something in her chest shifted dangerously. "No harm done," he said, his voice warm and amused. "I should have been watching where I was going. These supplies had me half blind." They both knelt down to gather the scattered items, and Natalie noticed his hands were stained with various colors, evidence of someone who actually used these supplies rather than just buying them. There was something genuine about him, something real that felt like oxygen after days of suffocating in the artificial world she had entered. "Are you an artist?" she asked, handing him a tube of cobalt blue. "Trying to be," he said with a self-deprecating grin. "Some days I think I am just making very expensive messes on canvas. I am Peter, by the way." "Natalie." She felt her cheeks warm as their fingers brushed, reaching for the same brush. "What kind of things do you paint?" Peter stood, offering her his hand to help her up. His palm was calloused and warm, the grip confident without being overbearing. Landscapes mostly. The Pacific Northwest has this quality of light that I am obsessed with capturing. That moment right after the rain when everything looks washed clean and new. They stood there on the cobblestones, people flowing around them like water around rocks, and Natalie realized she did not want this moment to end. There was something about Peter that made her feel like herself again, not the desperate daughter or the bought bride, just Natalie. "Could I buy you a coffee?" Peter asked, his expression hopeful. "As an apology for nearly knocking you over." "I ran into you," Natalie pointed out, but she was already nodding. "But yes, I would love that." They found a small cafe tucked away from the main market street, the kind of place locals knew about but tourists never found. Peter ordered them both lattes with the ease of someone who came here often, and they settled at a corner table by the window where they could watch the city come alive under the emerging sun. "So what brings you to Seattle?" Peter asked, wrapping his hands around his mug in a gesture that seemed both protective and contemplative. Natalie hesitated, the truth too complicated and painful to share with a stranger, no matter how kind his eyes were. "Family business," she said finally, which was not entirely a lie. "I am supposed to be here for a couple of months." "Just supposed to be." Peter caught the nuance in her tone. "That sounds like you are not entirely happy about it." "It is complicated," Natalie said, staring down at the foam art in her latte. A tiny heart swirled in the cream, mocking her with its perfection. "Sometimes life does not go the way you planned, and you have to make choices you never imagined making." Peter nodded slowly, something understanding flickering across his features. "I get that. I walked away from a career that everyone told me I was crazy to leave. My family still thinks I am wasting my life playing with paints when I could be doing something more substantial with my time." "But you are happy?" Natalie asked, looking up at him. "Most days," Peter said honestly. "Some days I wonder if they are right, if I am just being selfish chasing this dream. But then I finish a piece that captures exactly what I was feeling, and I know I made the right choice. Life is too short to live it for other people, you know." Natalie felt something crack inside her chest, a fissure in the armor she had been building around herself. This stranger understood something essential that she had been trying to deny. She was living for other people, sacrificing herself because it seemed like the noble thing to do, but what was she really saving if she lost herself in the process? They talked for 2 hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the coffee. Peter told her about growing up in Seattle, about his obsession with the way light hit the Olympic Mountains at sunset, about the art show he was preparing for in 6 weeks that felt both exciting and terrifying. Natalie found herself sharing more than she intended, talking about her love of architecture, her mother's recovery from cancer, the pressure of family expectations without mentioning the specific arrangement that had brought her here. When they finally left the cafe, the afternoon had grown long and golden, casting everything in that perfect light Peter had described. He walked her back toward downtown, neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. "Can I see you again?" Peter asked as they stood on the corner where they would part ways. "Maybe I could show you some of the spots that inspire my work. The tourist guides never take you to the real Seattle." Natalie knew she should say no. She was engaged, even if the engagement was nothing but a business contract. She had no right to start something with this man, no matter how much she wanted to. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I would really like that." They exchanged numbers, and Peter's smile when she texted him, so he would have her contact, made her heart do dangerous things in her chest. As she walked back to her apartment, Natalie felt the weight that had been crushing her lift slightly, replaced by something light and warm and utterly terrifying. Over the next 3 weeks, Natalie fell into a pattern that felt both wonderful and guilt-inducing. She spent her required time with Preston, which consisted mainly of formal dinners and appearances at charity events, where they played the part of a couple falling in love. Preston was perfectly polite, handsome in a conventional way, and completely uninterested in her beyond what she represented for his business. Their conversations were surface level and stilted, two people going through motions neither of them believed in. But her time with Peter was everything the rest of her life was not. He took her to hidden beaches where they watched storms roll in over the Pacific. He brought her to his studio, a converted warehouse space he shared with 3 other artists, and she watched him work with an intensity that made her understand what passion really looked like. They hiked in the mountains, ate at hole-in-the-wall restaurants where the food was incredible and unpretentious, and talked about everything from philosophy to their favorite childhood memories. Natalie found herself falling for Peter in a way that terrified her. It was not just attraction, though she definitely felt that every time he smiled at her or brushed a strand of hair from her face. It was deeper, a recognition of something essential. He saw her, really saw her in a way no one else ever had. With Peter, she did not have to pretend or perform. She could be uncertain and scared and angry about the situation she was in, and he listened without judgment. "Tell me something you have never told anyone else," Peter said one evening as they sat on the deck of his studio, watching the sun set over Elliott Bay. Natalie was quiet for a long moment, watching the colors shift and change across the water. "I am terrified that I am going to wake up one day and realize I have lived my entire life for other people. That I will have made all the right choices, been the perfect daughter, done everything I was supposed to do, and I will have no idea who I actually am underneath all of that." Peter turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Then do not let that happen." "It is not that simple," Natalie said, her voice breaking slightly. "Sometimes you have obligations that are bigger than what you want." "Nothing is bigger than who you are," Peter said firmly. "Nothing and no one is worth losing yourself over, Natalie." She wanted to tell him everything then about the contract and the arranged marriage and the impossible situation she was trapped in. But the words stuck in her throat, fear and shame keeping her silent. What would he think of her if he knew? Would he see her as weak, as someone who could be bought? The thought of losing the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and worth knowing, was more than she could bear. The following week, Preston summoned her to his office with an uncharacteristic urgency. When Natalie arrived at the top floor of the Blackwell Logistics building, she found him pacing behind his desk, tablet in hand, looking more animated than she had ever seen him. "We have a problem," Preston said without preamble. "Or rather, you have a problem that affects me." Natalie felt her stomach drop. "What kind of problem?" "Someone sent me photos of you with another man," Preston said, turning the tablet to show her. "Multiple occasions over the past 3 weeks. Coffee shops, hiking trails, what appears to be an art studio." "The Chen family is very traditional, Natalie. If they think this engagement is not genuine, they will walk away from the merger. Do you understand what that means?" The photos were surprisingly clear, capturing moments Natalie had thought were private. Her laughing with Peter at the market. The two of them standing close on a beach, his jacket draped over her shoulders. The intimacy was obvious even in still images, and she felt sick looking at them. "Who sent these?" she asked quietly. "That does not matter," Preston said impatiently. "What matters is that you are jeopardizing everything. I do not care what you do after we are married, that is your business. But until the Chen deal is finalized, you need to be more careful. End it with whoever this is, or at least be discreet enough that no one can take pictures." Natalie looked at Preston, really looked at him and saw nothing but cold calculation. There was no anger, no jealousy, just concern about his business deal. And she realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. This was not a life, it was a performance, and she was expected to play her role perfectly. "What if I cannot do this?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "What if I cannot marry you, Preston?" His expression hardened. "Then your father's company files for bankruptcy, your family loses everything, and you live with the knowledge that you had the power to save them and chose not to. Is that what you want?" She thought about her parents, about the sacrifice they had already made, the years of her mother fighting cancer while her father worked himself into the ground trying to keep everything afloat. She thought about the relief in her father's eyes when she signed that contract, the first real hope she had seen there in months. And she thought about Peter, about the way he made her feel alive and seen and like herself for the first time in her life. "No," she whispered. "That is not what I want." "Then we understand each other," Preston said, his tone softening marginally. "I am not a monster, Natalie. I know this situation is not ideal for either of us, but we made an agreement and I expect you to honor it. After the wedding, after the merger is secure, we can discuss arrangements that give us both more freedom. But for now, I need you to be the devoted fiancé. Can you do that?" Natalie nodded, feeling numb. As she left his office, her phone buzzed with a text from Peter asking if she wanted to grab dinner. She stared at the message for a long time before typing out a response that she knew was a lie. "Sorry, busy tonight. Talk soon." She could not see Peter anymore. It was not fair to him, and it was torture for her. Every moment with him made her want things she could not have, made her question decisions she had already made. The kindest thing would be to end it cleanly before either of them got hurt worse than they already would be. But Natalie discovered she was not as strong as she thought. When Peter showed up at her apartment the next evening, concern written all over his face, she could not turn him away. "You have been avoiding me," Peter said, not accusatory but worried. "Did something happen?" Standing in her doorway, looking at this man who had somehow become essential to her happiness in just a few weeks, Natalie made a decision that was probably selfish but felt necessary. She had 2 more weeks before the wedding. 2 more weeks to be herself, to be with someone who made her feel alive. Then she would do what she had to do, would marry Preston and save her family and live whatever life that led to. But she needed these 2 weeks. She needed them like she needed air. "I am sorry," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I have just been dealing with some family stuff. It is complicated." Peter entered slowly, his artist's eye taking in the expensive apartment with its sterile decor and lack of personal touches. "This does not feel like you," he observed. "Nothing here looks like it belongs to the woman I have gotten to know." "It is temporary," Natalie said, which was both true and false. This apartment was temporary, but the life she was stepping into felt permanent in all the worst ways. "Peter, I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, patient and open, and the words died in her throat again. She could not tell him. Not yet. Not when she only had 2 more weeks to pretend that her life could be different. "I am really glad I met you," she said instead. "These past few weeks have been the best I have had in a long time." Peter's expression softened, and he crossed the room to take her hands. "I am glad I literally ran into you at the market. Natalie, I do not know what is going on with you, and you do not have to tell me if you are not ready. But I want you to know that whatever it is, whatever you are dealing with, I am here." "Okay," she nodded, not trusting her voice, and when he pulled her into a hug, she let herself be held. His heartbeat was steady against her ear, and she memorized the feeling of being in his arms, knowing she would need this memory to sustain her through whatever came next. The following 2 weeks were bittersweet perfection. Natalie spent every moment she could with Peter, lying to Preston about family obligations and appointments. They were careful to avoid places where they might be photographed, but within the privacy of his studio or her apartment, they grew closer in ways that terrified and thrilled her. Peter painted her one afternoon, capturing her on canvas as she sat by the window reading. When he showed her the finished piece, Natalie barely recognized herself. The woman in the painting looked peaceful and beautiful, bathed in golden light, completely at ease in her own skin. "Is that really how you see me?" she asked, something tightening in her chest. "That is who you are," Peter said firmly, "even if you do not always feel like it." She kissed him then, unable to stop herself, and he responded with an enthusiasm that made her forget about everything except this moment, this man, this feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Peter rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I know it is fast and maybe I am crazy, but I needed you to know." Natalie felt tears slip down her cheeks because she was falling in love with him too, had probably been falling since that first collision in the market. But she could not say the words back, could not give him that when she knew what was coming in just a few days. "Peter," she started, but he put a gentle finger to her lips. "You do not have to say anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know. Whatever happens, however complicated your situation is, I am all in. We will figure it out together." But they would not figure it out together, because Natalie had not told him the truth. She had been a coward, stealing these moments while lying by omission about the fact that she was engaged to someone else, that in 5 days she would be standing in a church promising herself to a man she did not love. The night before her wedding, Natalie sat alone in her apartment, staring at the wedding dress hanging on her closet door. It was a beautiful gown, custom-made and probably worth more than her car, and looking at it made her feel like she was staring at her own funeral shroud. Her phone rang, and her father's name appeared on the screen. She almost did not answer, but guilt and duty had been drilled into her too deeply. "Hi, Dad," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just wanted to call and tell you how proud I am of you," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know this is not what you wanted, Natalie. I know what I am asking you to sacrifice. But you are saving our entire family. Your mother and I, we do not have words for what this means." Natalie closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know, Dad. After tomorrow, everything will be okay," he continued. "The bankruptcy will be stopped. We can keep the house. Your mother can continue her treatments without worrying about the cost. You are giving us our lives back." After they hung up, Natalie sat in the dark, feeling the walls close in around her. She thought about calling Peter, about confessing everything and begging him to tell her what to do. But she knew what he would say. He would tell her not to do it, to walk away, that nothing was worth sacrificing herself. And he would be right from his perspective. But he did not understand the weight of her family's expectations, the debt she owed them for everything they had given her. She did not call him. Instead, she turned off her phone and cried herself to sleep, mourning the life she would never have. The wedding venue was a prestigious hotel overlooking the waterfront, decorated with thousands of white flowers that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Natalie stood in the bridal suite, being fussed over by stylists and Preston's sister, feeling disconnected from her own body. The woman in the mirror looked perfect, every hair in place, makeup flawless, but her eyes were dead. "You are going to be a beautiful bride," Preston's sister said warmly. She was nice enough, genuinely trying to welcome Natalie into the family, which somehow made everything worse. There was a knock at the door, and one of the staff members poked her head in. "Miss Vance, There is someone here to see you. He is very insistent." "Who?" Natalie asked, her heart beginning to race. "He says his name is Peter Barrett." The room spun. Peter was here. Peter had somehow found out about the wedding and was here. Natalie felt equal parts relief and terror, the careful walls she had built around herself beginning to crumble. "Tell him I cannot see anyone right now," Preston's sister said firmly. "The ceremony starts in an hour." "No," Natalie said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "Give me a minute, I will talk to him." She gathered her dress and made her way to a private sitting room down the hall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Peter was standing by the window, wearing a suit she had never seen him in, looking devastatingly handsome and completely out of place in this sterile luxury. When he turned and saw her in her wedding dress, something in his expression broke. "So it is true," he said, his voice rough. "I did not want to believe it when I saw the announcement in the paper this morning. Natalie Vance marrying Preston Blackwell. That is you. That is him." "Peter," Natalie whispered, unable to move, frozen in place by the hurt and confusion in his eyes. "Were you ever going to tell me?" he asked. "Or were you just going to disappear and leave me wondering what I did wrong?" "It is not like that," Natalie said desperately. "Peter, please let me explain." "Then explain," he said, his voice breaking. "Because I am standing here looking at the woman I love wearing a wedding dress meant for another man, and nothing makes sense." Natalie finally moved, crossing the room to him, needing him to understand even though she had no right to ask for his understanding. "It is an arrangement," she said rapidly. "Preston needs a wife for a business merger and my family needs money. We are not in love. It is a contract, a transaction. I signed it before I met you." "And you could not tell me this," Peter demanded. "You let me fall in love with you while you were planning to marry someone else." "I tried to stay away," Natalie said, tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "After Preston confronted me about us, I tried to end it, but I was selfish. I wanted just a little more time with you before I had to give up everything." Peter stared at her, processing her words. "You are doing this for money. I am doing this for my family," Natalie corrected, her voice fierce. "My mother nearly died from cancer. The treatments bankrupted us. My father is about to lose everything he spent his life building. This marriage saves them. How can I choose my happiness over their survival?" "By recognizing that they would not want you to sacrifice yourself like this," Peter said intensely, taking her shoulders. "Natalie, you cannot marry him." "I do not care about the money or the contract or any of it. We will figure something else out. There is always another way." "There is not," Natalie said, shaking her head. "I have looked at every option. This is the only way to save them, and I have already made my choice. I just need you to understand that meeting you, falling for you, that was real. That was the only real thing I have had in months. I am sorry I lied to you. I am sorry I was not brave enough to tell you the truth. But I need you to know that I love you. I love you, and that is why I have to let you go." Peter looked at her for a long moment, his expression shifting through anger and hurt before landing on something that looked like determination. "What if there was another way? What if I could solve your family's financial problems?" "Peter, you are an artist," Natalie said gently. "I appreciate the thought, but we are talking about millions of dollars in debt." "I know," Peter said, "and I have it." Natalie blinked at him, not understanding. "What?" Peter ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated and uncomfortable. "My full name is Peter Barrett, as in Barrett Industries. We are one of the largest manufacturing companies in the Pacific Northwest. My grandfather founded it, my father runs it, and I was supposed to take over eventually. That is the career I walked away from. But I still have a trust fund that makes me independently wealthy. I can write you a check right now that would cover your family's debts 10 times over." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "You are rich." "I am very rich," Peter said bluntly, "which is exactly why I do not tell people. Everyone treats you differently when they know, but you did not know and you fell for me anyway. The real me, the person I actually am, not the Barrett name or the money. Do you understand how rare that is? How much that means to me?" Natalie's mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the paint-splattered artist she had fallen in love with and this revelation about his background. "Why did not you tell me?" "For the same reason you did not tell me about Preston," Peter said. "I was scared. I wanted to keep you separate from all of that, but I am telling you now, take my money, pay off your family's debts, leave Preston and choose me, choose yourself." It was tempting, so incredibly tempting that Natalie felt herself swaying toward him. But doubt crept in, the same sense of obligation that had driven every major decision in her life. "I cannot take your money, Peter. That is not love, that is another transaction. I would just be trading one wealthy man for another." "No," Peter said firmly, cupping her face in his hands. "You would be accepting help from someone who loves you. There is a difference. I am not asking you to sign a contract or play a role. I am asking you to be with me because we belong together. The money is just removing an obstacle. It does not change what we have." "Preston will sue," Natalie said, grasping for reasons why this could not work. "Breaking the contract will ruin him, and his family has lawyers who will destroy us." "Let them try," Peter said. "My family has better lawyers. And honestly, if Preston's entire merger depends on him being married, that is a garbage business deal anyway. The Chen family should be looking at his company's metrics, not his marital status." Natalie looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity and love and hope. This man had walked into a wedding venue on what was supposed to be her wedding day and offered to solve all her problems just so she could be happy. How many people got a moment like this? How many people got a second chance at choosing joy? "I am scared," she admitted. "What if we are wrong? What if this does not work out and I destroyed everything for nothing?" "Then at least you will have tried," Peter said softly. "At least you will know you lived your life on your own terms. Natalie, I cannot promise you forever. I cannot promise perfection. But I can promise that every single day I will choose you, choose us. Is not that worth the risk?" And standing there in her wedding dress, 20 minutes before she was supposed to walk down the aisle to a man who saw her as a business asset, Natalie made a choice that was entirely her own. "Yes," she said. "Yes, it is worth the risk." Peter's face transformed with relief and joy, and he kissed her with all the pent-up fear and love and hope of the past few weeks. When they broke apart, Natalie was laughing and crying at the same time, feeling lighter than she had in months. "We need to get you out of here," Peter said practically. "Do you have regular clothes?" "In the other room," Natalie said. "But Peter, I have to tell Preston myself. I have to face him and explain." "Are you sure?" Peter asked, concerned. She nodded. "I need to do this the right way." "Will you wait for me?" "I will wait as long as you need," Peter promised. Natalie went back to the bridal suite and changed out of the wedding dress with shaking hands. Preston's sister tried to stop her, confused and alarmed, but Natalie was calm as she explained that she could not go through with the wedding. She owed Preston a face-to-face conversation, though, and she asked for him to meet her privately. Preston arrived looking annoyed but not particularly surprised. "I assume this is about the artist," he said. "Natalie, we discussed this. You cannot throw away everything over some romantic fantasy." "His name is Peter," Natalie said firmly. "And yes, this is about him, but it is also about me. Preston, you are not a bad person. You have been perfectly honest about what this arrangement was, but I cannot marry you. I cannot spend my life pretending to be something I am not, living for everyone else's expectations. I am sorry." "Your family will be ruined," Preston said coldly. "You understand that, right? This is not just about you." "My family's debts will be paid," Natalie said. "Peter is helping with that. You will have to find another way to secure your merger. But honestly, if the Chen family cares more about your marital status than your actual business, maybe you should reconsider the partnership anyway." Preston was quiet for a long moment, studying her. "You really love him, do not you?" "I do," Natalie said simply. He nodded slowly. "Then I hope it works out for you, but we had a contract, Natalie. My lawyers will be in touch." "I understand," Natalie said. She had expected nothing less. She walked out of that hotel with Peter, leaving behind the wedding dress and the contract and the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. The scandal was immediate and enormous. The society pages had a field day with the story of the runaway bride and the billionaire artist. Preston's lawyers did indeed come after her, but Peter's family lawyers were better, and eventually, a settlement was reached that satisfied everyone. Natalie's father was furious at first, unable to understand why she had thrown away the arrangement he had worked so hard to secure. But when Peter's check cleared, paying off every cent of debt and setting up a trust for her mother's continued medical care, some of that anger faded. It took time, months of difficult conversations and boundary setting, but eventually her parents came to accept that Natalie had made her own choice. Peter and Natalie took things slow after the dramatic wedding day exit. They had jumped into intensity so quickly that they both agreed they needed to actually date properly, without secrets or looming deadlines. He took her to gallery openings and quiet dinners. She helped him prepare for his art show, which was a huge success, and established him as a serious artist rather than just a wealthy dilettante playing at creativity. 6 months after the almost wedding, they took a trip to the Olympic Peninsula, hiking through rainforests that seemed prehistoric in their wild beauty. On a beach where the Pacific crashed against ancient rock formations, Peter pulled out a small box. "I know we said we were taking things slow," he said, dropping to one knee in the sand. "But I have known since the moment you walked out of that hotel in your jeans and sweater instead of a wedding dress that you were the bravest, most incredible person I have ever met. I do not want to rush you, but I need you to know that whenever you are ready, I am here. Will you marry me, Natalie? For real this time, not for money or family or obligation, but just because we love each other." Natalie looked at him, this man who had crashed into her life and given her the courage to choose herself, and felt nothing but absolute certainty. "Yes," she said, laughing as happy tears streamed down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." They got married a year later in a small ceremony on Peter's studio rooftop, surrounded by his artist friends and her family and people who genuinely cared about them. Natalie wore a simple dress she picked out herself, and Peter wore a suit with paint stains on the cuffs that he had not noticed until the ceremony started. It was chaotic and imperfect and exactly right. Preston sent a wedding gift, surprisingly enough. An expensive piece of modern art with a note that read, "Congratulations on finding something real." Natalie appreciated the gesture even though she and Preston would never be friends. 2 years after their marriage, Peter had his first major gallery retrospective in New York City. The centerpiece was the painting he had done of Natalie sitting by the window, titled "The Moment Before Everything Changed." Standing in that gallery, watching prestigious collectors and critics praise her husband's work, Natalie felt a profound sense of gratitude for every choice that had led her here. "What are you thinking about?" Peter asked, sliding an arm around her waist. Just that I arranged to marry a billionaire, Natalie said with a smile, unaware that a stranger I ran into at Pike Place Market would become my soulmate instead. Peter laughed, pulling her closer. Best collision of my life. Mine too, Natalie agreed. They had a daughter 2 years later, a beautiful girl with Peter's hazel eyes and Natalie's determination. They named her Claire, and she grew up in a house filled with art and love, and the understanding that she could be whoever she wanted to be. Natalie went back to school for architecture, finally pursuing the passion she had set aside for so long. Peter continued to paint, his work growing more acclaimed with each passing year. Some evenings, when Claire was asleep and they sat on their back deck watching the sun set over the water, Natalie would think about the girl who had signed that contract in her father's office. That girl had been so scared, so convinced that sacrifice was the same as love, that duty mattered more than happiness. She wished she could go back and tell her younger self that choosing joy was not selfish, it was necessary. That the right person would not want you to shrink or sacrifice or pretend. That real love made you braver, not smaller, but she could not go back, and she did not need to. That frightened girl had made it here eventually, had found the courage to walk away from the safe choice and toward the uncertain, beautiful possibility of genuine love. And every single day, Natalie was grateful for the stranger who had crashed into her at the market, who had seen her for who she really was, and who had loved her enough to fight for her happiness even when she had been too afraid to fight for it herself. Their story was not perfect. They had arguments and disagreements and moments of doubt like any couple. But underneath it all was a foundation of genuine love and respect, the knowledge that they had chosen each other freely, without obligation or transaction. That made all the difference. On their 10th anniversary, Peter painted Natalie again. This time she was not alone by a window but standing in their home surrounded by evidence of the life they had built together. Their daughter's toys scattered on the floor, Natalie's architecture blueprints spread across the table, late afternoon light streaming through windows that overlooked the Seattle skyline. When he showed her the finished painting, Natalie saw herself through his eyes again, but this time she recognized the woman immediately. She looked happy. She looked free. She looked like herself. "That is who we became," Peter said softly, standing beside her as they looked at the canvas. That scared woman by the window found her way home. Natalie leaned into him, feeling his solid warmth, his steady presence. "We found our way home," she corrected. "Together." And that, she thought, was the real story. Not the dramatic wedding day escape, or the revelation of hidden wealth, or any of the other sensational details people focused on when they heard their tale. The real story was two people choosing each other every single day, building a life based on honesty and love and the courage to be themselves. That was worth more than any contract, any amount of money, any arrangement could ever provide. Years later, when Claire was old enough to ask questions about how her parents met, Natalie would tell her the whole story without shame or regret. She would explain how sometimes we think we know what we have to do, what we owe other people, and how terrifying it can be to choose something different. But she would also explain that the scary choice, the one that feels impossible, is often the one that leads us exactly where we are meant to be. "So you almost married someone else?" Claire would ask, wide-eyed. "I did," Natalie would confirm. "But then I met your father and everything changed. He helped me understand that I did not have to trade my happiness for security. That I could have both, but only if I was brave enough to reach for it." "Were you scared?" Claire would ask. "Terrified," Natalie would admit. "But your father was braver than I was. He showed up when it mattered most and gave me the courage I needed, and I will never stop being grateful for that." Peter would wrap his arms around both of them then, his two favorite people in the world, and Natalie would marvel again at how a random collision in a market had led to this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life. She had arranged to marry a billionaire for all the wrong reasons, unaware that the stranger she bumped into would become her soulmate, her partner, her home. And she would spend the rest of her life grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them together, and for the courage they had both found to choose love over obligation, joy over duty, themselves over everyone else's expectations. That was the real happily ever after. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. And absolutely, completely theirs.